Hi and welcome to episode 7 of my sock knitting series. In this episode I am going to show you how I make a slip stitch heel like this, where I make what looks like a slip stitch rib pattern. And this will make the heel appear slightly thicker and more solid than an ordinary stockinette heel. And I will show you on this sock that I'm knitting, and I'm using a third color yarn for my rib, heel and toe. So I will find my third yarn here, and this sock has the beginning of the round here, and there's a side band here and here. So I will begin my heel in this side, and at the same place where the beginning of my round is, I will leave my yarn for the sock itself attached, because I can use that later on without having to cut it and make more yarn ends to attach. So I'll just leave it there. And first I make sure I have the right stitch number on these two needles. I will knit the heel back and forward over needle 1 and 2. So first I have counted my stitches and made sure I have the right stitch number and that my heel flap will begin and end in the right place. And when I begin my slip stitch heel, I begin by working the two needles one row in stockinette. So I will begin and simply knit. I'll tighten this a little bit just to get started. I will do knit stitches only on both needle 1 and 2. So I will continue until I arrive here, and then I will get back to you with the next step. And now I have one row of stockinette stitches on needle 1 and 2. Then I turn my work to the wrong side and I slip the first stitch. And when I do, I make sure my working yarn goes between stitch 1 and 2 and not around the outside here, because then I will make little knots along the edge of the heel flap, and I don't want that. So to bring the working yarn over to the right side, I bring it between the first and the second stitch, and then I purl my way back over needle 2 and then 1 until I arrive at the beginning of the row. So I will continue to purl until I arrive here where I began, and then I will get back to you on how to begin the slip stitch pattern. Now I have purled my way back to the beginning of my row, and I turn my work to the right side again And you can see I have finished 2 rows of my heel flap. And now I will begin to make the slip stitch pattern. And the reason why I don't begin from the first row is because when I slip the stitch, it will pull on the stitch on the row before. And if I did that on the pattern, I would pull the stitches in different colors, and it will look the transition between the ankle of the sock and the heel flap would look uneven. So now when I have done 2 rows, I will only pull stitches in the same color as the heel flap, so it will not be visible. And now I will begin, and I begin by slipping the first stitch. Now I don't have to worry about the working yarn because it is already on the side of my work that goes away from me. And I slip the first stitch, and then I knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, and so it continues. So you can see that the stitches that I slip, they will be pulled, since no extra yarn will be added like I do here. So it would not look as nice if I pulled white yarn, blue yarn, and it would look like a lot of small mountaintops along the transition between the ankle and the heel. And I will continue and show you the whole row of slip 1, knit 1, because when I get to the end of needle 2, there can be 2 different situations depending on my heel flap being an even or odd number. I have an odd number heel flap, which means that, and you will see this as I get to the end of needle 2, I slip 1 and knit 1, and I'm left with 1 stitch. And if I slip this one, because I knitted this stitch, so maybe I think, okay, so I knitted this one, then I slip the last. But when I turn to the wrong side and go back, I also slip the first stitch, which means this stitch will never be worked. And you cannot pull it along the whole side of the heel flap. So when I face this situation, I simply knit the 2 last stitches. And I turn to the wrong side and purl back. I slip the first stitch and I make sure my working yarn goes between stitch 1 and 2, and I begin to purl. And now from the wrong side I do not slip any stitches, I simply purl all stitches on my way back. And this is how the pattern continues. When I work on the right side, I slip one, knit one, slip one, knit one, and then knit the 2 last stitches if I have an odd number, or maybe it's called an uneven number in English. Yeah, if I have an uneven number of stitches, I knit the 2 last. So from the right side, slip one, knit one, slip one, knit one. From the wrong side, purl all stitches. Slip the first stitch, of course. And I will go back and forward doing those 2 rows until my heel flap has the length that I need it to be. And when it has, I will get back to you and show you the result. The heel flap is now finished, and you can see the structure here. If I pull on it a little bit, you can see there are small stitches in between the larger ones, and the larger stitches are the slipped stitches. And I have been consistent in slipping the same stitches on every row I have worked from the right side. And this heel flap will appear a little thicker and a little more solid than a regular stockinette heel flap, and it will not stretch as easy. And now I am ready to begin the heel turn, and I begin my heel turn from the beginning of my row. I slip the first stitch, and I will now work stockinette stitches only. And how many stitches you knit now will depend on the pattern you are following. But you will usually knit a little bit across the middle of the heel flap. But you should check your pattern to know how many stitches. I follow my pattern, so I stop here and then I knit 2 stitches together. Then I pick up 2 stitches instead of 1 and knit. And when I have done so, I knit 1 more stitch like this. Then I turn to the wrong side. I slip the first stitch, and then I purl a few stitches back the other way. How many stitches will be stated in your pattern. But it should be symmetrical, so I stop at the same place in this and this side. And then I purl 2 stitches together when I am on the wrong side. Pick up 2 stitches and purl them together. And then I purl 1 more stitch. And I turn to the right side again. Slip the first stitch, and then I knit. And now you can see that I have a gap here in each side where I knitted and purled the 2 stitches together. And when I continue, now I don't need to count stitches to know where to decrease, because every time I approach one of the gaps, I stop 1 stitch before the gap, and when I am on the right side, I knit the gap together. I pick up the last stitch before the gap and the first stitch after, and I knit them together, and I knit 1 more stitch. Turn to the wrong side, and let's see, I slip the first stitch and I purl, and I do the same thing here. I purl until I have 1 stitch left before the gap, like this. I pick up the last stitch before and the first stitch after the gap, and I purl them together, and then I purl 1 more stitch. Then I turn my work again. I slip the first stitch, and I continue the same way, back and forward, and I knit and purl the gap together. This will move the gap farther and farther out to the sides, and when I have closed the last gap in each side, my heel turn is finished. And when I have done so, I will get back to you and show you how the finished heel will look. And here I have the finished heel. You can see I have gotten rid of all the gaps. Easier to see on this side when I pull the working yarn a little, but all the gaps have been worked together, and you can see here the decreases in each side of the heel. And you can also see here that the heel flap itself has the slip stitch pattern that creates this rib, and on the heel turn, and the part of the heel that you will step on is in stockinette. And here you can see the shape. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching.